In the halls of power where the shadows crawl, Brett's voice echoes a serpent's call. With a smile so sweet, he sold us a lie, the phantom of safety while our loved ones die. Adjunct professor, a mask on his face, playing with lives in this dark twisted space. Victoria quakes under the weight of his sins as he tightens the noose with a smirk on his grin. Sutton is a snake, make no mistake, blood on his hands, a deal with the fate. In the grip of a panic, he started the game. Now we're left haunted forever with shame. You pulled the strings, puppet master of dread. With a heart of deception, you've danced on the dead. Locked down the cities, shut down the streets, a curfew imposed, a retreat, bitter defeats. With no sound or reason, you bend to their will. While the world around crumbled, you gathered your fill. Coalition for trust, what a sick little jest. Cleaning your slate while we mourn the rest. In the dark of the night, the truth will ignite, and the fire of justice will burn bright. Sutton is a snake, make no mistake, blood on his hands, a deal with the fate. In the grip of a panic, he started the game. Now we're left haunted forever with shame. You pull the strings, puppet master of dread. With a heart of deception, you've danced on the dead.
G'day, Rockstars. How's it going, guys? Have you guys ever heard of Coalition of Trust the Science? It's being run by this former Chief Health Minister, Brett Sutton. Oh my goodness. If you guys have never heard of Brett Sutton, don't you stress. I made a quick documentary about him, so check it out and enjoy.
Before 2020, if you'd asked a Victorian to name their chief health officer, you'd probably get a blank stare. The job was crucial, but let's be honest, almost nobody noticed. Then, out of nowhere, the pandemic arrived, and suddenly Brett Sutton was everywhere, whether we liked it or not, steering Victoria through chaos. Sutton landed the gig in 2019, armed with a background in public health and tropical medicine, plus stints in Afghanistan and Ethiopia because why not? Sure, he was used to disease outbreaks, but nothing could have prepared him for COVID-19, or for being dissected by the entire state, every single day. People loved calling him Professor Sutton, though technically he was an adjunct clinical professor, basically a fancy title for being really good at your job. Overnight, Sutton became the face of Victoria's response, forced to explain complicated science to a public suddenly obsessed with epidemiology. His daily appearances made him a comforting presence, or, depending on who you asked, the perfect target for everyone's frustration. His face was suddenly everywhere, even on mugs and t-shirts, because nothing says public health crisis like celebrity merchandise. To some, he was a hero. To others, he was the villain in Victoria's never-ending drama. Either way, everyone had an opinion. As Chief Health Officer, Brett Sutton signed off on public health orders that delivered Victoria some of the world's longest lockdowns, a record few will forget. Melburnians spent months indoors, with rules dictating when you could leave, how far you could travel, and who you could see. 5-kilometre limits, mandatory masks, and shuttered businesses. Sutton's signature was everywhere. These necessary evils were meant to flatten the curve and save hospitals from collapse. The logic: if you don't see anyone, you can't catch anything. Simple. Schools, pubs, and cafes closed, because the virus only comes out when you're having fun. But not everyone was thrilled. The human cost, mental health, education, and businesses, was significant. Then came hotel quarantine, a protective shield that instead sparked Victoria's deadly second wave. The virus strolled out, leading to hundreds of deaths and more lockdowns. Sutton landed in the firing line, revealing at the inquiry he didn't know private security was in charge until it was too late. The trust built during the crisis began to unravel, one headline at a time. Of all the restrictions, Melbourne's nightly curfew was the most controversial. From 8 p.m. to 5 a.m, residents were ordered indoors, with few exceptions. Many saw it as excessive, more about control than health. Brett Sutton publicly supported the curfew, saying it reduced transmission risk. But the public wanted clear evidence, and the curfew's impact was hard to prove. For years, its true origin was unclear. Was it health advice or politics? The government fought to keep documents secret, fueling suspicion. In 2025, a released email revealed the curfew wasn't Sutton's idea. It was a political decision by Premier Daniel Andrews and his cabinet. Sutton formalised it after the fact, giving it public health backing. For some, he was just doing his job. For others, he blurred the line between science and politics. Brett Sutton's legacy? Oh, it's only split right down the middle. No big deal. He resigned in 2023, apparently because endless hours, relentless stress, and threats to his family just weren't as fun as they sound. For some, he's the caped crusader who swooped in to save lives. Move over, Marvel. They say he heroically steered Victoria through the storm, because who doesn't love a good crisis? Others? Well, they see him as the poster child for draconian rules and, let's be honest, a few policy hiccups. For them, Sutton is the guy who locked away their freedoms, because who needs those, right? The curfew and lockdowns? Oh, just a tiny bit controversial, barely worth mentioning. Some even wonder if the cure was worse than the disease. Imagine that. So, hero or harbinger? Depends on which side of the internet you're on. He didn't stop the so-called deadly virus, he failed, and we are paying the price for it. But hey, the fallout? Still going strong. Just ask anyone. Sutton's story is Victoria's pandemic story was a horror novel affecting millions of lives. Now he wants to launch Coalition for Trust in Science. Not a chance.
Okay, Rockstars, and as much as Brett Sutton was despised for his cruelty, there were quite a few people that actually worshipped the guy.
I'm too sexy for TV, but they put me here, you see, to make you stop and quarantine. But I'm too sexy for a tie, open-shuttered every night as we fight this COVID fight. 'Cause I'm a doctor, Brett Sutton's my name, and I do my little turn on the big screen. Yeah, it's on hygiene and why you should quarantine, and I shake my little tush as the girls scream.
Oh, that was cringeworthy. Oh, that was bad. So yeah, I don't see what they'd like about him, but to me, he's just a backflipping clown.
Getting that third dose is protection against severe illness, but also protection against getting infected in the first place. Despite 2, 3, 4 doses of the vaccine, it's not so good at preventing infection in the first place. So we are getting infected.
What? No apology? My goodness. That's not all that Brett Sutton has failed at.
Brett Sutton has expressed his regret after travelling to Canberra to attend work meetings and an awards night. The Chief Health Officer came under fire for the 2-day trip when Melburnians were still in lockdown.
Former Chief Health Officer Brett Sutton has admitted he failed to explain critical advice during the COVID pandemic. But the state government is standing by Victoria's response despite calls for a royal commission.
You think the response eroded trust?
I think the pandemic eroded trust. I think the response probably played its role as well.
The former Chief Health Officer Brett Sutton candid on Victoria's approach.
Do you think you failed to explain sometimes?
Of course I did. Of course I did.
A federal report revealed a lack of clear, honest communication was one of the most harmful aspects of the pandemic. But the expert at the time admits,
I think evidence changes all the time, and I think sometimes it just wasn't there. And so, of course, sometimes you're making a best guess.
Best guess. He was guessing, guys. I hope it was worth it. Just have a look over here. I hope it was worth it.
So today, something that made me angry. Former Chief Health Officer Brett Sutton. Now, since the end of the pandemic and when he stepped down from his position as Chief Health Officer, he's kept a pretty low profile, and I think that's a good thing. But today he's launching a thing called Coalition for Trust in Science. And he wants us to believe the experts, the scientists more. Apparently too many people are prone to believe, cures off the internet and weird treatments and that sort of thing. Now, he might be right on this, but I would say this to Brett Sutton, this is all I'll say about it. It was Brett Sutton who authorised, the closing of playgrounds during year 2 of the pandemic here in Victoria. It was Brett Sutton who said keeping kids out of school was a good idea. It was Brett Sutton who imposed the curfew. Remember, you had to be back in your home by 9 o'clock each night. It was Brett Sutton who essentially said, well, we might not be able to have cancer screening because, keeping people at home is the most important thing. Now, we now know that a lot of those decisions were not based on science. They were based on panic in Brett Sutton's office, panic in the government's office. And we know this because Victoria was the state that did things differently. So for Brett Sutton to pop up and say, trust me, I'm a doctor, just believe in the science and don't you dare question what I or any other so-called expert says is nonsense. The pandemic proved to us that the experts didn't know what they were doing, particularly here in Victoria.
Believe me when I say this, Rockstars. Trust the science will not come into play if we remind people of the atrocities that happened during COVID. Because if they're trying to push very heavily on trusting science again, you gotta think, why?
If you look at the COVID operation from a financial standpoint, it was absolutely clear that it was one way you balance the books. It worked.
The major corporations like Amazon and others were allowed to continue business. Meanwhile, other businesses, particularly small and medium-sized entities, were deemed to be, quote, inessential. Many of them were put out of business. And so what we saw was a global wealth transfer of a reported $3.3 trillion from the working classes and the middle classes to this kind of super rich billionaire brigade.
The people who ran the operation made an absolute fortune. It was economically, as a taking, it was a huge taking.
And that included billions of pounds of taxpayers' money going to pharmaceutical firms for so-called vaccines. Whatever the truth around COVID, Dr. Hughes says the response deployed dangerous elements of social control, what he calls weaponised deception.
We see techniques of shock and awe being applied through the lockdowns, techniques of isolation, making reality seem strange and threatening. All of this helps to de-pattern the mind. These are all well-known military tactics.
Look them in the eyes and tell them you're doing all you can to stop the spread of COVID-19. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
These are, in fact, very nasty and very vicious techniques which were deployed against the public of multiple countries at once. These are forms of serious psychological abuse. I think once the public starts to understand that, there's going to be a very severe pushback against everything that's happened.
The general population cannot fathom the psychopathy of the vision that they're facing. So they can't fathom that a group of people would organize and engineer this kind of mass atrocity to get where they want to go.
You see, Rockstars, I trust science. I just don't trust Brett Sutton and probably our government too. I mean, their handling of COVID was way over the top, guys. People have suffered. There are suicides, there are people injured, there are delays in children because they were unable to read facial expressions. So we gotta hold the government accountable. So please, don't trust coalition of Trust the Science. And do your best to stay healthy. Take care, guys.